Hello. In this next lesson, we're going to be taking a look at some useful inquiries and reports that would be of use to an accounts receivable manager within X3. So let's start off by taking a look at some of the inquiries that are available. So if we come under our APAR accounting menu, then go to inquiries, then let's start by coming to this one, invoices. In this inquiry here, I'm going to specify the company that I want to run the activity for. Here in the control field, I'm going to designate that I'm running it for my receivables as opposed to running it for my payables. Then from there, I could filter on my bill to customer, my pay by customer. Over here, I could also filter on an invoice number. I'm going to go ahead and do a search. And that's going to return to me a list of invoices. All right, so in here you have the invoice number, the financial site, the customer ID who you billed, the invoice date, due date, the currency that it was generated in, how much the invoice is made out for, how much has been paid up until this point in time, and if it has been paid, if you scroll to the right, you can see what the associated payment identification number is. All right, so from here, if you click on the action button, you have the capability of tunneling back to the original invoice record, tunneling over to the payment inquiry, and also tunneling to the journal entry associated with the invoice. So in this case, let's go ahead and tunnel over to the payment inquiry. Then in here, I'm going to go ahead and do a search, and that's going to pull up the detail of the payment that paid this particular invoice. Okay, and if I scroll over to the right here, I have my date of payment as well as the check number if the customer did pay by a check. That will be listed within here. Then from the payment inquiry here, I could further tunnel down to the payment record itself. So here is the check receipt that was generated against that invoice. Okay. So that's the invoice inquiry and the payment inquiry. Another useful inquiry that we have, if I come under my sales menu, then go to inquiries, then over to invoices, I have my list of invoice inquiry as well as the invoice lines. So if I want to see the individual item details on my invoices, I'll run the invoice lines. If I just want to see the header information, I can do the list of invoices. So within here, again, I specify my company code. I can filter by selling site, customer, invoice type, project. I can filter on a particular date range. Over here in my invoice categories, I could further filter to include or exclude, say, pro formas. If I didn't want to see credit memos, I can uncheck that box. In here also, maybe if I just want to see my items that haven't been posted yet, I could go ahead and uncheck the posted option, and that would show me just my unvalidated invoices. And also to note, under the criteria button here, we have some additional filtering options available to us. One important filtering option to point out to you is the module. So by default, this inquiry is only showing you invoices that were generated by the sales module. But if you also want to include invoices, kind of the miscellaneous invoices that are generated through APAR accounting, you can go ahead and check on that BP's module, and that will serve to add those invoices to this list also. Okay. So in here, just like on the other inquiries, I have my action button that I can click on, and this will provide me the ability to tunnel directly back to the invoice, or I could also tunnel to the sales journal traceability, which will give me, if it is set up, the sales order is, or excuse me, the invoice is linked to a sales order, that would also show up therein. Okay. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at some reports in the system. So under our reports block here, I'm going to come down under my financials menu, then go into my tracking of open items. So one report in here that I find to be useful is the age trial balance report. So this is going to give you your AR aging. So in here I can specify my cutoff date, specify the company that I want to run it for. Down in here for my business partner, if I wanted to generate it just for a particular customer, I could specify their customer ID in here. On the date basis for the aging, I can either have my buckets aged out by invoice date or by due date. In the BP type field here, I can either run this report, well, in the context of accounts receivable, I'm going to want to run it for customer. But if I wanted to get an AP aging, I would go ahead and run it for supplier here. Down in my summary section, if I have this set to no, that's going to show me all the individual invoice and credit details on my customers' accounts. If I have the summary set to yes, that's just going to give me, the grand total by aging bucket. The sorting field here, again, this is a yes or no parameter. If it's set to no, it's going to sort by the customer ID. If it's set to yes, it's going to sort it by the customer name. Then finally down here for the transactional currency, if I want my reports, an individual aging report, to be run for each billing currency, I can go ahead and set that to yes. Okay, so I'd come over here, do a print, and when I print it out, that's going to go ahead and generate this aging for me. Okay, so again, you have your date, you have your customer, the customer's credit limit. Here are all the invoice and credit details on the customer's account, how old the open item is. Then I have my aging buckets for not due, 0 to 30 days past due, 31 to 60 days past due, and so on. Okay, at the end of the report here, it gives me a grand total of all my outstanding accounts receivable. Another useful report in here is our customer statement report, and you can find that under reports, financials, tracking of open items, and it's this NA CUS STA report. Okay, so for this one, again, you can run it as of a particular cutoff date for a particular financial site. Then in here, if you only wanted to run it for a particular customer, you could specify their account number. Then you could run it in your company currency or your ledger currency versus the transactional currency. So again, we come over and do a print, and that'll go ahead and generate these customer statement reports that you could send out to the customer. So it has the cutoff date, the customer's address information, their account number. Then down in here, it'll go ahead and give you a running total of all the activity on the customer's account. Down at the bottom of the report, it's got their activity broken out by aging bucket, as well as the total. Okay. So one last report to show you here. And this would be helpful for people who are doing payment application. Down under the financials payments block here, this is the payment listing report. Okay, So with this report here, this is going to basically give you a listing of all the checks that are in your batch, or maybe if you did a batch of wire transfers, you could get it on that basis also. So once again here, we specify our company code. We specify what, on line number 4, what our date of deposit was. If you have your batch number that you want to just print the report out for a particular batch, you can go ahead and specify that on line 7 here. Okay, another important parameter here might be on line number 11 here. If you only want to see, say, the unposted batches, you could set the first value and the final value to entered. If you only want to see posted batches, you can set this parameter, the first and final values, to in the bank. All right, so again, we go ahead and do our print, and that's going to go ahead and generate this payment listing report for you. So again, it's showing you all the payments, the transaction type, if it's a check receipt or a wire receipt, the bank into which the funds have been deposited, the date of the payment ID, customer account number, the amount of the check, there's the customer's name, check number, then in here it's going to show you all the invoices and credit memos that were paid. All right. Then over on the final pages here, it's going to go ahead and give you a grand total of what was paid by payment type and by bank. Then on the final page, it'll show you the number of payments that were part of the batch. Okay, so that's a little bit about useful inquiries and reports for an accounts receivable manager in X3. I hope this video was of use to you. And if it was, I would ask you to please remember to like and subscribe. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to inbox me.